You're listening to The Watchers, a show where two women from opposite ends of New Jersey watch movies and TV about people who won't stop trying to make fetch happen.
Stop trying to make fetch happen.
It's not going to.
It's not.
We watched Mean Girls.
We did. Breaking news, Andrea. Oh, wait, I'm Jodie.
Breaking news, you're Jodie and I'm Andrea.
Breaking news, I'm Jodie, you're Andrea. Other breaking news. Can you guess?
Are you going to tell me you've never seen this fucking movie?
I've never seen this movie.
Jodie, are you...
That's actually
kind of great.
I've seen scenes, so many scenes from this movie all over.
It makes, of all the movies, it makes sense for that to be the case. This is the one.
This is the one, I know. I've never seen this movie. I knew it from the first 5 minutes. I was like, oh no, I've just seen like a whole bunch of scenes from this movie.
Hilarious. That's actually kind of perfect though, because I think this movie and an analysis of this movie might benefit from a fresh 2025 set of eyes.
I might be the villain in this podcast though.
No, as I said, I almost said last week. What I tried to do, and what I hope our listeners tried to do, whether they're a me or a you in this situation, is to approach this with fresh eyes. Because I think I had been so saturated with this movie that I was fully desensitized to it going in. And because of that, I think that I am able to bring both lenses to this movie in a way that I haven't been able to with other movies.
And I was not desensitized to it other than because like there's so much of it that I haven't obviously seen outside of the main clips. I also had like a running tab in my notes of like how many sayings and lines. I was like, oh, that's from this. Okay, that's where this comes from.
There are so many. There are ones that I could point to as being like, oh yeah, my friend group said that forever.
Right.
But then there are some that like, I'm like, oh, I still say suck on that. I am 30 or 40 years old and I still say suck on that.
That's funny.
And I forgot that it's from Mean Girls.
There's so many. I mean, it's really kind of absurd how many there are. Because there's some like more obvious ones, like obviously stop trying to make fetch happen.
I want my pink shirt back.
On Wednesdays we wear pink.
Oh my God, Katie, you can't just ask people why they're white.
That one I was not familiar with.
Oh.
There's definitely like the 10-year age gap here between the two of us is really showing up in this last batch of movies. Because this is 2004. Oh yeah, we usually talk about the movie itself. Everybody knows what this movie is. Like it came out in 2004, screenplay by Tina Fey.
Directed by Mark Waters.
Yeah.
Did you do any research into him? Do you know who?
Rude.
Well, no. I didn't mean that like that. Do you know who his brother is?
His brother?
Yeah. Okay, you didn't. It's totally fine.
No,
Jodie, his brother is Daniel Waters, who directed Heathers.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Okay.
Crazy.
So my thesis statement on this movie is the extremely generic Gen X take of Heathers did this better.
It's funny. It's so, oh boy, let's get into the but also and there's a lot.
Yes. But I understand that is, they're not doing the same thing necessarily.
But it is impossible to argue with you when his brother is Daniel Waters.
I can't believe I didn't know this. I promise I did research.
I'm so excited that you didn't come across that. Isn't that?
Because I say that very tongue in cheek. The Heathers did it better because obviously it's not the same movie. It's like, more than 10 years later. It's a different world. It's a different time. It's got there's no murder.
But Heathers kind of planted the seed for the mean girl trope in high school movies, I think.
Absolutely. I mean, especially this, like, teen, like, ensemble cast.
Right. And, like, the, like, really specific kind of in-group with its own set of rules and the outsider for whatever reason. Like, you are so right about all of that. This is just, like, less stylized. I think a big part of that is this movie it's in its DNA, comes from a self-help book for parents.
Yeah.
Like, I think that takes some of the bite out of it.
Yeah, because literally the bullying in Heathers is almost celebrated. Mm-hmm. And it's like, okay, well, if these people are horrible, let's kill them.
Right.
Instead of like, let's
I think
let's try to make them nice.
The couple of things that really sort of explain this movie for me are that it originally had an R rating that they had to then walk back. That's where you get some of the stuff that I think weirdly works because it's so odd and specific, where you get lines like the one that everybody talks about is like, what's her name made out with a hot dog. And the original line was masturbated with a hot dog. And actually the original line was masturbated with a frozen hot dog. Then they had to walk it back to just hot dog for some reason. And then it was made out with a hot dog, which is, everybody sort of knows what's being said there, but it's just so odd that it's kind of, and then the other one is your muffin buttered instead of is your cherry popped, which is like also gross, but in like a weird. And so that's like, some of the dialogue is so specific and kind of unique. And it's, a lot of it is because of that. So that's the first thing. The second thing is that it's based on this self-help book, Queen Bees and Wannabes. And I think like those two aspects, and then also that it's Tina Fey, but I think like keeping all of that in mind, like this is what this movie's going to be.
Yeah. And she has a specific comedic voice that I tend to appreciate most of the time. Like there was a period of time where my pop culture diet was entirely like 30 Rock, Community, and Parks and Rec. And like, that is such, I mean, they're not all the same, but that's like a very specific comedic voice that is very influenced by the Tina Fey, Saturday Night Live era. But it's so funny how many things this lifts directly from Heathers. Yeah. Like, there's not a technical cafeteria poll, but there's like the cafeteria moment where he stops her, like you were just mentioning, the sexual harassment questions. But like, I don't know. I feel so weird about this movie now. Like, I didn't not enjoy it. I'm not here to hate on it, but also this is what I think we had said we were worried about, which is that it's become such an object in pop culture that it ceased to become a movie.
Right. And there are like a couple of things. I think some of it is really sharp and funny. I think some of it is really silly and funny. I think there's some stuff that ages poorly, of course. Yeah. But then there's also some stuff that is just like, to me, even in 2004, and again, I can't pretend I didn't love this movie. I did. But even in 2004 felt sort of, I know it's dumb to say in a movie called Mean Girls, but mean-spirited in a way where like, sometimes I think Tina Fey's problem is she's too concerned with writing jokes. And so like the movie kind of suffers for that in some ways. I think we talked last week, and I don't remember if you said, and this was you thinking that you had seen Mean Girls, that it had less heart. Yeah. Then, and I said, I like agreed, and because I was thinking of incorrectly how this movie ends as being a little more thoughtful than it is. But it's like the thing that stops the conflict is Regina getting hit by a bus, which is funny. That I remember being shocked in the movie theater when I saw that scene. But it also, all it does is break the like sort of tension there. And then Katie gives this really watered down speech at Spring Fling. And the thing that I was like, oh, this speech sucks. It sucks anyway. But when she tells, and she's like, Emma Gerber, that hairstyle must have taken hours, and you look really pretty. And the hairstyle clearly didn't take hours. No. And I know that's a little thing to nitpick at, but it's like, even her trying to be nice is fake. Yeah.
Yeah. The speech is terrible. The conclusion is incredibly pat. And I think that, to me, again, I can't escape my own reality, which is when I grew up. But like, the ending of Heathers ends with like Winona Ryder, after having blown up JD smoking a cigarette outside her high school.
Well, and then just to put it in context with the rest of these movies, is like I was also thinking, of course, Cruel Intentions, which is another movie I loved. Is that a movie that you saw, or is it one that
I've seen?
Okay.
I've even seen that semi-recently. I think I was mentioned on a podcast or something, and I was like, I wonder how that holds up. And I watched it like 4 years ago.
Okay, I haven't seen it in a very long time, but I have watched the ending scene on YouTube, like, as recently as this morning, but just in general, it's something I return to because I love so much, because it's the mean girl gets her comeuppance because the kind of like outcasts, it's not really the right word for her, but she's like the good girl in it.
Yeah.
Who's like new to the school. The Katie. Yeah. Publishes her dead boyfriend's journal, which is basically a scrapbook. And it's like Mean Girls, it's a take on that. It's Regina publishing her own, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But it's still this like, so then, okay, I'm kind of sort of wandering into something here that I hadn't considered really until right now. And it's like, how much of this stuff is the vocabulary of the teen movie versus actual teen stuff? And how much of that is like, well, it's derivative or pointing, like, I think if we both liked this movie more in 2025, we'd be referring to those moments more as homage. But because we're having difficult feelings about the movie, we're maybe being a little less generous.
Yeah, I think
because we celebrated Clueless last week for the fashion being similar.
Well, we celebrated Clueless also, though, for the way that it balances a bunch of different difficult things. It balances like satire, and it balances heart, and it balances like the type of good feeling that Tina Fey is going for at the end of this movie, but actually gives you that good feeling. Like it's more successful.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think maybe Tina Fey isn't very nice. But then I remembered, like, she's admitted that she was a mean girl in high school, that she wasn't popular, but she was a bully. Right. That, like, 30 Rock episode is kind of like, pulling from her real life. And I think maybe she might just struggle with writing things with heart. And that might be why I don't click with 30 Rock the way other people do. Is I need things to be to have a little soul. Now I'm getting too mean.
No, I don't think you are. As with me and 30 Rock, I feel like I just love Jack McBrayer. I really love him. I really love the side characters in that show. I was never necessarily in it for the Liz Lemon. I also, as you and I are both comedy fans, like I love a cleverly written, little bit. And so like that, I always appreciated that in 30 Rock. I certainly never, it's not a show I've ever gone back to. Mm-hmm. Like I've never revisited it. It's just something that like at that time was a good laugh.
Right. I heard her describe it as overstuffed today. And I was like, maybe that's my problem with it.
It is. It's just joke after joke after joke. Right. It's like, how many can we fit in 22 minutes or whatever?
Which is impressive and an exercise, but it's just not going to connect with me in the same way that other things. Like, I mean, Community is that a little bit too, but I just think they're all, I don't know.
Oh, but Community has so much heart.
Yeah.
Community
absolutely.
is just all heart. Mm-hmm. Just a millimeter beneath the surface. It's just like a beating heart of just like love for the people in it. So it's a very different vibe.
It is like the hard exterior of Community and all of the jokes on top are hiding how vulnerable it is, as opposed to Mean Girls, where it feels like it's trying to insert some heart and vulnerability to trick you into thinking that it's not just.
Right. And I think part of the issue is that a lot of that hinges on Lindsay Lohan's character, who I think this is acted well by Lindsay Lohan. I just think that it's written kind of flimsily. Mm-hmm. Like it's written as a stand-in for an idea of a person.
Yes.
And it's like, so it's like in the same way that all of Africa is Africa.
Man. That's an example of something where I was like, even in 2004, I was like, we're just going to name an entire continent. She's Africa. That's where she's from.
All of Africa is like a savanna with hyenas and lions chasing each other. Like, and okay.
This is
not
exactly
a new
right.
take, but
no. But the way to fix that would be, like, Karen can think that, because that's representative of a kind of person in the United States, in the United States in 2004 especially. Like, yeah. But then you have to have, like, Katie and her parents or something, like, providing a more nuanced, not even nuanced, just a more accurate take.
All they ever do is sit on the porch and have books laid out in front of them. Like, everything feels very thin in the parts where it shouldn't. Like, it's okay. Like you were saying, like, it's okay if the sort of mean girls, like if Regina George is thin, okay, fine. Like, she's a caricature of a bully, but like, the person that we're supposed to identify with shouldn't be a caricature of a nice person.
And I think this might be another case of the fact that this is just this is based on a self-help book which doesn't have a narrative. And I read some of the book while I was doing research for this, and it's fine. It's been, like, reissued more than once and updated. Like, people seem to love it. It's in the beginning, it's broken up into these girl archetypes in Girl World. And then Tina, from what I've read, sort of was like, okay, well, then we'll have these characters fit into these archetypes. I just don't know that that's the, like, best way to write a complex, fleshed out character.
And, like, what it ends up doing is, because these are not new ideas, like, I haven't read the book. I am impressed that you actually read some of it. But as has been repeatedly mentioned in this podcast, I am old. And this shit this isn't new. Like, in the 80s in high school, or I was in high school in the 80s, I'm not that old, but in, like, the early 90s, late 80s in middle school and high school, like, I could have probably broken down these types of girls for you and knew all of them and could name all of them. And so, like, what ends up happening is that she takes this sort of, not to criticize a book I haven't read, but this text that does something that maybe, like, articulates well something that was, like, a part of everyone's general knowledge of, you know, of the way that teen girls, it's just sorry, I'm going in 7 directions at once, but I feel like it's partly the fact that girls and women just haven't been studied by other girls and women in this way up until, you know, maybe this time frame. And so it seems like it's new information, but it's not to anyone who looks at the world around them with any criticality and has been a woman. Right. And so, like, it kind of feels like taking something that's a little bit of a basic idea and building I feel so bad that I'm being this critical, but builds kind of a basic movie on it with a lot of really snappy dialogue. Like,
I think that's right. I don't think
like, there's so much smart stuff in this, but most of it is the writing of the way they talk to each other. And, like, well, every single one of the main tropes of the high school has been in 17 other movies before and after this.
It's so funny because this is what makes this movie one big meme, though. Yeah, it's so easy to spread these things around because you don't need the context. You don't need, just, and I mean, there is something impressive there. It's also the other thing that makes this movie a meme is that it was 2004 and it was the first movie that, like, had that sort of,
and the people in it are great. Like,
oh yeah.
And I think that also is part of what elevated it, is that, like, the people in it fully inhabit these archetypes, like, perfectly. Yeah. And so, you know, the fact that, so we haven't mentioned this yet, but there was a reboot done last year
the musical?
Well, there was a musical in 2018, and then there's the film reboot musical.
Oh, that's based on the 2018 musical.
Yes, but which is based on this, so it's like it's kind of a turducken.
Well, and it also had a made-for-TV sequel. Right. And guess what I watched this morning?
Did you watch the video game playthrough?
No, but I watched like half of this musical.
Oh my God.
And it's so, okay.
The 2024 one or the stage version?
2024 one, which is based on the stage one. and Tina Fey wrote the book for the musical and produced the movie and is in the movie.
Right.
So it's sanctioned. Let's put sequel talk and stuff toward the
end. Yeah.
But I have some Tina stuff that I think kind of really also helps get at. We might do the opposite of a compliment sandwich here. We started not too positive, and I can't promise that we're going to end super positive. So maybe maybe let's just talk about the movie in its 2004 context, because there's some interesting stuff. We can talk alternate casting. We can do all of our fun stuff, and then maybe we'll return through the sequel.
We'll shit on it at the end.
I don't want to say, oh no, man,
I'm kidding. But okay, here's the thing. We have both the blessing and the curse of doing this movie in the context of so many other of this type of movie that we just did. We did Heathers at the very beginning of our movie runs. We did Clueless. We did like all these different high school movies. We've done so many of these coming of age ensemble films recently that it is so hard not to compare.
Well, and something else that you just made me realize, too, is that this movie comes in a sort of, we have Clueless, which is so obviously so good. And then we got a bunch of movies that tried to look at teenagers, movies like She's All That, which like is a guilty pleasure movie of mine, but it's not.
10 Things I Hate About You, everything else in that same,
And I don't know that those are good movies. Yeah. And I don't know that they're smart movies.
Right.
And then Mean Girls comes in 2004, and it's a lot smarter. Of it is smarter. A lot of it, at least, the dialogue is snappy. And when, I was 18, I had just, is it April 2004? I was just getting ready to graduate high school. It felt to me like it was letting the teenagers talk and act closer to the way teenagers talk and act.
Yeah, definitely.
And so I think that's why it really clicked with my generation, and then in the same way that Clueless clicked with me with the younger generation. And so there's also that, I think, laying that context out of coming off of, like you said, really fantastic movies like Clueless and Heathers. And
I mean, we could go all the way back to John Hughes. Like, we've got teen high school movies that are in our sort of canon of movies that we've talked about, and also just that we've watched and haven't talked about over the last, like, previous 20 years before this, and then 20 years since. And so it is this interesting pivotal point, but it's like, when this movie is put into context with those other movies, some of the flaws, I think, become more apparent.
Mm-hmm. Well, and especially because it's trying to put itself in context. Like, we said last week, the book is kind of like an ethnography of this really specific school in New Jersey. And the interiors, anyway, of the high school are shot in New Jersey. Mm-hmm. So it's not that, like, New Jersey wouldn't let them film there. But it's set in Evanston, Illinois, which is, as Tina Fey says, where the high school movies are from.
Yep.
And so she's, trying to be part of that canon, and also we're talking a lot of shit, but it is part of that canon at this point, whether we like it or not.
Yeah, Tina Fey doesn't need us to validate her, so we're fine. But like, it's purposely putting itself in that genre and in that conversation, and it's lifting. I think the thing that I think that I'm coming to with why watching this for the first time in 2025, like, it's partly the memification of it, and that I already know all the beats from not even having seen the movie, but I would already know all the beats anyway, because they've been in every other movie.
Right.
Like, there's nothing in this that separates it other than the dialogue, the writing. The way that the dialogue is written is elevated from a lot of other types of films like this. Mm-hmm. But it's like, it's lacking the heart of some of the other ones, and it's lacking the, like, it's lacking a character that I care about. Like, maybe if I was 14 or 15 when I watched this movie, I would identify with Lindsay Lohan, but I doubt it. Like, there's no one in it other than Janice.
I was going to say Janice.
Obviously, Janice and Damien. But Janice turns out, like, Janice is not given the ability to be, like, a nice person until the very end.
Well, no, Janice is a mean girl too.
Right.
In fact, I have found This is so good.
Wait, I know what you're going to say. I think.
Reddit.
Yes.
Did you
breakdown?
Oh my god, it's so good.
I
mean, did you see that like this person? It's like kind of their bread and butter is doing really specific.
No, I didn't. I didn't dive in. We should tell our listeners what we're talking about because on our movies, there's a post by Lundgren's Front Kick. Mm-hmm. That's called, I rewatched Mean Girls 2004, counted the mean moments, and logged each of the main characters' screen time. Predictably, Regina is the worst as she does something mean every 1.53 minutes when she's on screen. Janice is really close, though, as she does something mean every 1.5 minutes. There is a pie chart. There are statistics.
It's incredible.
It's a thesis and supporting evidence.
It's really amazing. Also, if you are a weird little, like, pop culture and also like data goblin like Jodie and I.
Yeah.
Some other posts.
Oh, I'm so excited about this.
The Con Air seating chart. What is the most Fast and Furious film in the Fast and Furious franchise? How far did the shark travel in Jaws: The Revenge?
Oh my god.
How does the creature from It Follows travel? How fast can Leatherface run?
Oh my god.
Yeah, really good. How much blood poured out of the sprinklers during the Blood Raven Blade?
Wait, I like this one. When it comes to Dwayne Johnson's filmography, his films that feature wildly sweaty performances have higher critic and user averages than his less sweaty performances.
It's so funny. How many calories did Shaggy and Scooby-Doo ingest when they ate the cotton candy glob? So this is somebody who's really thoughtful about this stuff. I trust their analysis. The fact that Janice is also a mean girl, and also like I'm trying to be a generous reader for this because then I'm like, well, yeah, because nobody is one thing.
Right.
And I even find myself sort of, I can't say, like sort of sympathizing with Regina, especially in the second half of the movie. And it feels sort of triumphant to me as the viewer when she's standing in the hallway with all the chaos around her after she's passed out the copies of the burn book. Mm-hmm. And so...
Well, because she's the scapegoat and everybody else is also a bitch.
Right. And so it's like, that's the thing is that like Regina's been held up as this villain, which I mean,
and they're all
but they're all shitty.
They're all terrible.
Yeah. And
and we're supposed to forgive Janice because she was viciously bullied by Regina George. And honestly, part of me does because like the specific kind of bullying in this movie, I have to say, like, that is the one place where it does differ a little bit for me from these other movies and also veers more towards like realistic experience.
Absolutely.
Like the types of bullying, especially in the 90s and 2000s around sexuality and around all of those things, like I experienced. And so part of me is like, yeah, you know, I'm with Janice. Fuck Regina George and her rumor spreading and like her, you know, gay fear mongering bullshit. Like, obviously, I feel for her in that way, but like,
and that
she's not a super sympathetic character.
No,
after we get past that revelation,
right? And that kind of specific, again, queer phobic, like bullying is so real in the late 90s and early 2000s in schools. Like, I was also reading Rosalind Wiseman is the person who wrote the book, saying that like she and Tina spent time together and then stuff that she said just ended up in the movie. Like, and so maybe that's why some of it does feel more realistic because this person has done this really close study of teen girls.
Right.
I want to point, though, to maybe one of the issues that you and I are reacting to that's not super explicit in the movie, but is a problem. And there's an essay on cherrypicks.com, the Cherry Picks, which is a website I'm not familiar with, but I wasn't familiar with before finding this, but it's an article from 2019. It's by Amanda Shirker, and it's called I Adore Mean Girls, but Let's Stop Acting Like Teen Girls Are Mean. And when I first read that, I was like, okay, but teen girls are kind of mean.
Yeah.
But the author has a really good point. They write, throughout the film, there's a tornado of gossiping, betrayal, scheming, plotting, and deception. Such behavior is treated as something innate to teenage girldom, part and parcel of living in girl world. And I read that, and I was kind of like, well, yeah. Not once does the film look into the reasons why girls learn to assert power indirectly, wage war passive-aggressively, and battle for every last inch of social capital available to them.
Yep.
Most importantly, the movie disregards the way the girls are systematically taught to suppress their rage, their desires, their fears beneath a veneer of lip-glossed half-smiles, the way they're punished socially for having original ideas, for pimples, for having sex.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do think that a little bit, it's a little bit to our conversation last week about Clueless, where, like, one of the reasons I think that we forgive, or at least I forgive Cher for her sort of vapidness and her obsession with appearances is because we know it's coming from outside of her, you know, like the makeover idea and all of that. And like this, I guess I'm saying I agree with what you just read, in that like the girls don't come out of the womb inherently genetically predisposed to be bitches to each other.
Right.
You know, like it comes from somewhere. And shockingly, could we blame the patriarchy?
Well, maybe, except Tina Fey doesn't think so, because
she doesn't.
I mean, I can't say for sure what Tina Fey thinks, but Miss Norbury, when they're in that like come to Jesus moment in the gym, she says you have to stop calling each other sluts and bitches.
Right.
It makes it easier for guys to call us sluts and bitches or whatever the sluts and whores, whatever line is. And it's like, I think you're confusing this as, I don't think that started with women. Like, I think, you know, and so like I don't know.
No, I think that's a really good point.
And it's not Tina's job necessarily to correct that cultural issue. But
no,
I just wish she had been a little more thoughtful about how she represented these characters. There's also just like the really obvious lazy stuff that like it feels like almost nobody's surprised that like, you know, my skin crawls a little bit when the Asian girls are the ones having sex with the coach is the one having sex with
the two young
Asian girls, like just stuff like that even in 2004 I was like, I don't even know. I don't think it was funny then. Like
I don't think it was either. Like I understand that we do
pretending right.
Like we do a lot of looking back and judging 20-year-old things by 2025 standards and trying not to do that. I do think that this feels like you could have done better with some of that stuff. Like I understand, like the R word's in it a bunch, which again, of the time,
it's also
fine.
in Clueless. Like,
yeah, but like there's other things where when they're looking at the map of the cafeteria and going through the different tables, that to me feels less subtly handled than Heather's, which is you know way before. So I do think there's a lot of like the Africa stereotypes is really the hardest thing for me because it keeps coming up over and over and over again. Like, and in some cases you could say, oh, well, she's poking fun at the ignorance, blah, blah, blah. But like, she's also displaying it by the way that she's characterizing her main character.
Right.
Like, if we're supposed to sympathize with anyone, it's Katie. And Katie is just as ignorant about it as anyone else. I do have to quickly shout out one of my favorite lines that I have heard before based on my based on my day job. But when they say in the mall, I love seeing teachers outside of school, it's like seeing a dog walk on his hind legs.
Yes.
That's
what I mean. Some of the
There's
stuff
so many
is
good lines.
really on it. Like,
yeah.
That one.
I just had a revelation. This is not new to me, most likely. I guarantee other people have said this before. Tina Fey comes from sketch comedy. This movie is a series of sketches. It's just a collection of sketches that are funnily written with great jokes, and none of them are too deep because sketches don't have the time to go too deep. Sketches are like a surface take on something that sometimes is really, really biting and accurate, but also isn't going to take you to a deeper place that is heartfelt and thoughtful.
Right. I also, again, kind of think Tina Fey is a little bit of a jackass. Like,
And like, she just, okay, this is getting into like Tina Fey bashing, and I hate doing this because like I do appreciate what she's done. But like, she reminds me a little bit of the girls who got kind of mean to fit in with the boys club in their chosen profession, that like leaned into being kind of a tough, like bitchy persona in order to hang.
Well, I think she might agree. I don't know that she'd directly agree with you, but just hearing her talk about her own sort of the way she became a bully in high school, it's a little different, but she has that skill sort of honed as a young person.
Yeah. And I think I'm just kind of like connecting it in my head right now to the whole sketch comedy of it all, because like you and I both have tangentially been around like improv and sketch comedy worlds. And 20, 30 years ago, it was pretty like bro culture dominant, really harsh for girls and women to be a part of in some ways. Like, you know, Cameron Esposito famously talks about how when they left improv for stand-up, it was partly because in every improv scene, they were suddenly like the girl giving a blowjob. Like there was no nuance whatsoever to like, you know, I think the joke, and I'm going to butcher this, is like, but I'm a penguin. Why am I giving, like, you know, like the scene has been set up, I'm an animal, but, you know, because I'm a female presenting person on stage, I'm, of course, in the scene going to be giving you a blowjob. Like, so that is the world that, and the time period that, and even earlier, that Tina Fey is coming out of. So. Yeah, I think that's all fair and worth considering. This is so meta. We're considering Tina Fey's positionality and the patriarchy as she did not allow us to do in this movie.
Yeah, it's tough. I
do love Damien in this movie, though.
Damien is fantastic.
He's the best.
Danny DeVito, I love your work. The first time I saw that, which is also mean. It's making fun of like a shorter, heavier girl in the bathroom, but like I remember laughing so hard I cried when I heard that line the first time.
Well, and like so the actor that plays Damien wasn't out at this point. And he talks in interviews about how he wishes that he'd been able to use this as like, you know, this big coming out moment and as a statement, but he wasn't brave enough at the time. But this is a gay character where the whole thing isn't that they're gay. Right. Like, that's not their whole personality. It's like a part of who he is, but he has other things to do in this film. Maybe not as many as I would have personally liked to see him get into, but, you know, he's not just the gay character. He has a few other traits, which is nice. Right.
I don't want to just keep adding problems to it, but because I do love Damien, but he kind of does have the unfortunate privilege of being the like accessory and kind of like establishing that like funny gay best friend trope.
I think I'm judging that on a huge curve when I say like he's, you know,
but
he's not just the gay character, but
well, and he tells a story in one of the articles that I'll link to about a young boy coming up to him and saying like, you know, in 8th grade, before Mean Girls came out, I was getting bullied for being gay. And then in 9th grade, like somebody came up to me and said like, you're gay, let's be friends. Something like that. I'm really boiling that down.
Sure.
And it's like, oh, now it's fashionable and funny to have a gay best friend.
Yeah.
And the way that like Janice says, he's almost too gay to function. That's only okay when I say it. And it's like, also not really okay when you say it.
It's funny because in the first 3/4 of this movie, I was kind of like, well, is Janice gay? Because if she is, then that's different.
Right. And then she ends up
at the end with Kevin, I think
Kevin
his name
Napor, Kevin G. Well,
I was like, wait a minute.
I think people, they were still like I think the movie would have been too gay for 2004, and it is very different to have like the funny, affable, chubby guy versus the like, you know, goth-ish, tougher lesbian on screen. The sequel, she's out. The sequel tries really hard to fix some of the issues from the original. So that's one of them. The cast is way more diverse.
The 2024 one, you mean?
Yes, sorry.
Yeah. No, I haven't. I watched the trailer. I remember when that was coming out, it was all over TikTok because Renee Rapp is like one of the main characters of like queer adjacent TikTok.
Yeah. And has the voice of an angel.
Oh my God, I know.
I needed some support in like figuring out why I felt so like itchy about this movie. And
I'm here to support you.
And so like talking specifically to the stuff with Damien and Janice.
Yeah.
There's an essay, there's an article on somebody named Glenda Brown published on Medium, and it's called Mean Girls, a time capsule of casual bigotry. And the part that I want to highlight, one thing that personally bothered me about the film is that Janice never gets to come up and sit Regina nor Katie endured, despite being just as cruel as they were. And then it talks about that a little bit. The film frames the homophobic jokes Janice throws at her gay best friend Damien as acceptable due to her proximity to him and an apparent acceptance of his homosexuality. After all, it's only okay when she does it. Sure, Damien laughs it off, but I can't count how many times high school me laughed off the racist jokes my white friends made at my expense. To me, Janice and Tina Fey represent how the average, non-outwardly bigoted person in the 2000s saw themselves. Despite her not being as outwardly homophobic as someone like Regina George, they still exercise the cruelty of the society they hail from and don't question their behavior.
That nails it, honestly.
We can't excuse the time because we just talked about this with Clueless, where like Christian is not a perfect representation of a gay person, but Cher is never making, I mean, Murray is a little bit, but
yeah, Murray is.
But like,
and Cher talks about how he's so smart about fashion and it's like, you know, all of those cliches are in there, but like, it's not, she's not picking on him. Right. She's not like,
she never says he's too gay to function.
Yeah. There's no digging. And so like, I think the idea that like, if in this film, Janice had actually been queer, I would have felt differently.
Right.
But
right. Then it is only okay when you say it. You're part of it. Like,
yeah. But because they made that decision, it rings. And that is, I want to highlight what you just read, because the end of that, where it's like this positioning yourself as like the good one while still taking the position that society has granted you and using it to put other people down, is like, it's not as obvious as the outward bully, but it's still bullying.
Right. And it's still supporting. It's the way that like people roll their eyes at the term microaggressions, but it's like the microaggressions might not be such a big deal if the macroaggressions weren't real. And the micro helps support and bolster and make the macro okay or accepted. And I think this is a good example of that. The complicated thing about Janice, though, is that if in this movie, Janice, as far as we know, isn't gay. She's not a lesbian. So Regina thinking she's obsessed with her is just Regina being obsessed with herself, right?
Right.
If Janice is gay, Regina thinking she's obsessed with her now is like, and treating her the way she does becomes like a hate crime. Like, you know what I mean?
I totally know what you mean. And I think that's why I was so mad about how they ended up portraying Janice, because like I said in the beginning, I was on board with a lot of her rage. For most of the movie, it got ugly for me at some point, but it was like I was basically very much relating my own experience as a queer kid getting this same treatment.
Right. Yeah.
And like
absolutely
the way that basically like ruined my life for a very long time. And then giving her that grace because of it.
I don't think Regina actually thinks she's gay either. Like, which makes it even more just Regina being nasty and knowing that the worst thing you can put on or thinking, whatever, that the worst thing you can put on Janice is that she's a lesbian.
It's the association of creepy girl with gay obsessive.
Right.
That is so insidious that it's like, oh, she's a little weird. She must be in love with me and she must be a gay stalker. And it's like, that is way more harmful than this movie gives it credit for.
Exactly.
I still love Damien though. And I love that he is he was on Big Brother a couple years ago, the actor, he's just kind of out there being himself. Mm-hmm. Of course, Lizzie Kaplan, most recently I saw in Fleischman is in Trouble, which is the most Upper West Side or whatever New York thing I've ever seen in my life.
I haven't watched it.
It was beautifully acted. Claire Danes is in it, so I had to watch it, legally.
Right.
But she's great in it. And of course, the connections, maybe to go to a lighter place for a moment, the connections in this film, cast-wise, to other things we have talked about, they're all over the place. Mm-hmm. I mean, Lizzie Kaplan, Freaks and Geeks, obviously. Daniel DeSanto, who plays Jason, was in Are You Afraid of the Dark?
Incredible. Wow.
Amanda Seyfried, who I always say her name wrong, she auditioned for Veronica Mars, but ended up obviously playing the murdered best friend. Mm-hmm. There's just stuff all over this that connects to all of the other things we talked about. Lily
Kane. Put some respect on her
Sorry.
She's the dearly departed.
Yes, the dearly departed Lily Kane. Michelle Trachtenberg was one of the people considered for Katie.
Interesting.
As was Kristen Stewart, which is interesting.
I didn't see... I read a lot about the alternate casting. I didn't see Michelle Trachtenberg. That's interesting.
Yeah.
She would have been a great Karen, I'll bet. Mm-hmm. Amanda Seyfried's great. That slack... She's so good at that vacant stare, slack-jawed.
I love her in this movie, actually.
She's so lovable.
I watched all of Dropout, where she plays Elizabeth Holmes, and she's excellent in that, too.
I forgot. I mean, I knew that was her, but I forgot that was her. Yeah, she's great.
Originally, Lizzie Kaplan was considered too beautiful for the role of Janice because they wanted. This is even in the casting, it's fucking sexist. Mm-hmm. The director wanted a Kelly Osbourne type. It's
yeah, it's really gross.
Come on. Jonathan Bennett, who plays Aaron Samuels, is a delightfully out queer man married to his husband.
Apparently he and Daniel really bonded because neither of them were out yet, but they confided in each other, and so they were really close. Yeah, it's very sweet.
I love that. Other actors up for Aaron Samuels or considered, James Franco. Would have been a very different movie. Mm-hmm. Penn Badgley. Another interesting one.
Yeah. Yeah, he's got to be kind of just teen. I mean, this...
Blank slate.
Yeah. I mean this very kindly because I think he's great in the movie and he seems like a lovely guy. But yeah, kind of bland, blank slate. He's got to be
bland. Yeah. Kind of harmless.
Yeah, exactly.
Reacting to the people around him. Mm-hmm. Lacey Chabert, who... most recently that I saw was in that Christmas movie that went viral.
Oh, yeah, with the hot snowman.
The hot snowman, yeah. Mm-hmm. She was in that. Obviously, lots of other things.
I think specifically lots of other Hallmark kind of movies. I think that's sort of her bread and butter these days, right?
It is, yeah. I knew her originally from Party of Five.
Yeah, same.
But yeah, she's done a huge list of Hallmark movies at this point. Who else? I mean, this whole cast is SNL alums also. Amy Poehler, Anna Gasteyer, Tim Meadows. They're just kind of populating the various adult characters.
That's another good example of what this movie is because apparently Tina kind of had to fight for that because they didn't want it to just feel like SNL. But then they're all great in it, but it does kind of just feels like SNL.
Well, and that's the whole thing I was saying about the. It feels like a bunch of sketches. Mm-hmm. You know, it feels like, oh, this is Amy Poehler's ditzy mom who wants to be everyone's friend.
Right, yeah.
This is Tina Fey's like spinster teacher who is uncool and doesn't know how to dress.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's just, everything feels so thinly drawn. And I hate to say that because this is such an iconic movie, but like, I think part of the reason it is iconic, like you said, is because it's so easily clippable.
Exactly.
Like a sketch would be, like something you would see on TikTok.
Mm-hmm. I think so. And again, that's actually fine.
Yeah.
Like it can be that. I think that's okay. The stuff that is like the other stuff that we've talked about today is the stuff that I think it gets a little bit more of a pass than some other movies do.
Right. Yeah. I think that's what I kept coming back to is like, there's so much in this movie that is kind of borderline a lot of things. There's stuff that's outright ableist and racist and all of these other things. And it's like, well, why does this movie not get looked at in the same way as some of those older films? And I think partly it's memeability and its thinness and its sketch comedy vibes. But yeah.
I mean, maybe part of it is how much everybody loved it in 2004 that it's like kind of hard to let some of that go.
Even Roger Ebert gave it, I think, 3.5 stars.
I think either 3 or 3.5. Yep.
Yeah. I found the original New York Times review for it. And it says, the tart and often charming new comedy Mean Girls, which opens nationwide today, is a version of the Heart of Darkness teenage social comedy Heathers for the tweener audience. Yeah. But then she says, Ms. Faye gives her screenplay a stylized vitality, though she adds a beer self-finale that, while standard for such movies, doesn't seem in keeping with this picture. That I really feel like is an accurate note. Mm-hmm. Like, that feels like tacked on and really insincere. Like, I think it's telling that the most memed part of that scene, or the most commented on part of that scene, is she doesn't even go here.
Right.
Because it breaks the sincerity.
Yeah.
It's like the sincerity is made fun of.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. It feels like Tina had a bunch of jokes and then was like, well, to make it a movie, there's got to be some sort of change at the end. How can we make that happen?
Yeah, we need an act 3 where people are redeemed. Mm-hmm. But it made a lot of money. It did really well, obviously. Its influence is kind of endless and a little bit absurd. Just a few references in like everyday culture to Mean Girls recently or semi-recently. Mm-hmm. This isn't recent. It feels recent to me. In 2013, the White House tweeted a photo of President Obama's dog holding a tennis ball and captioned, "Beau, stop trying to make fetch happen." Mm-hmm. And then, this one really got me. In June of 2018, the official Twitter account of the Israeli embassy in the U.S. made headlines when it responded to a tweet by Iranian leader Ali Khamenei calling Israel a malignant cancerous tumor with an animated gif of the "Why are you so obsessed with me?" quote. Like, Jesus Christ. This fucking movie should not be memed in, like, Middle Eastern politics.
It's been so removed. It's just that it's not. Like,
I know. I mean, Hillary Clinton also used that meme to respond to Trump at some point. Like,
yeah, but it's so removed from the original source that it's actually not in conversation with the original source at this point.
Right. But like the fact that this movie is like the source of memes and GIFs that have been used in conversations between world leaders, it makes me want to like walk into the ocean, to be completely honest with you.
I really think a big part of that is the timing, because this movie came out in 2004 again, when the sort of like, I think earlier I said memes were invented in 2004 and like the word meme predates even the internet, but like that form, the way we know it and use it today, really kind of started then. And so it's built into the fabric of that type of communication that it just is everywhere, and it will forever
always be. Yeah, well, and I mean, after me discovering I've never seen this movie. It is in my lexicon as well.
It is, yeah, shocking, but also not at all that it makes its way into these weird little places.
Yeah, absolutely. I also just have to point out that her mom being offered tenure at Northwestern is not a thing that happens. I know no one cares. You don't get just offered tenure somewhere.
While you're in Africa, and they just called her on the phone and said, "Come to our tenure. Here's some tenure at our university."
I mean, like, okay, people have been very famous scholars do get offered like very prestigious positions at universities occasionally, but this just, I was like, wait,
Katie's mom.
Everything just feels like. Everything in this movie just feels like if you try to dig beyond just this top level, someone like Tina Fey's little voice is like, don't worry about it.
Yeah, I think
Don't think about it too hard, you know? And like, okay, fine. Yeah. We won't, but we will.
Yeah, that same Glenda Brown, the author who wrote Mean Girls, A Time Capsule of Casual Bigotry, wrote... all of this isn't to say that Mean Girls should be canceled, but it is still important to look at the media we consume critically as we get older and wiser. It's tempting to say that this movie didn't age well. This is what we were trying to get at the beginning, but I don't think that's true. This isn't like a perfectly good carton of milk that went bad after leaving it out in the fridge out of the fridge for too long. Reductive depictions of marginalized people and the free use of slurs were always harmful.
I mean, we've talked about this with other films that came out before this, like almost 15 years before this. Mm-hmm. I specifically, because it's the one I'm the most intimately familiar with, think about the way that gay characters are treated in Pump Up the Volume.
Right.
Where they're tragic. Mm-hmm. You know, there's that piece of it. But the one gay character in that film does commit suicide, so I'm not saying this is a great representation. But the main characters who we're supposed to sympathize with have a lot of like care and sympathy for those characters. Mm-hmm. So it is possible. Like, all I'm saying is like, it's always been possible to not do this. We don't need to cut this movie slack just due to the time frame, I think is the point that I think we're both circling around. Like, it's always been possible to do a little bit better than this. And if it was just the fact that there are some slurs in this movie, because there are slurs in every movie from this time period, like we said with Clueless, but other things in it were less surface level and were less harmful, it would hit different.
Right.
You know?
Right. I think that's right.
Yeah. But this has everything. It has fat shaming. It has racism. It has all of it. So good times. I feel so bad. I wanted to just be like, yeah, Mean Girls. Instead, I was like, ugh, Mean Girls.
I know. I was worried this is how we were going to feel, but that's not a reason to shy away from it.
No.
And I think it's important to put all this stuff in context.
And I will still say lines from this movie probably in my daily life. Mm-hmm. Like, Mom, can you pick me up? I'm scared. Like,
exactly. Yeah.
You know, her hair is so big because it's full of secrets. Like,
although
I can't help it if I've got a heavy flow and a wide-set vagina. Like, this is
that poor actor being saddled with that line. Apparently, I will say that's one thing that, like, when they were working out the R to PG-13 rating, there was, again, a lot of stuff, like I mentioned earlier, that got cut. Mm-hmm. One of the things that Tina got a lot of pushback on was that line, and she fought really hard to keep it because she was like, she's just describing female anatomy. There's no curses, and that made it in. So,
yeah, I mean, and there's a lot of stuff in this that, like, there's something about it that feels a little bit like a throwback to me because of how regressive some of the high school stuff actually feels. Like the gym teacher or the health teacher whose whole thing is just don't have sex or you'll die.
Yeah.
Like that's another version of like a surface take on something that has a grain of truth in it, but also by 2004 was not the norm in most high schools.
Yeah. You know what it sort of feels like is maybe Tina writing her high school experience
in 2004. Yes, because Tina's just a few years older than me, I think. Okay, so she's 5 years older than me. So, like, we're not too far off in terms of what our high school experiences would have been.
Right.
I think you're right in that this feels a little bit like maybe she's putting things from 20 years prior into a movie that takes place a little bit later.
Mm-hmm. I think after all of that, the biggest issue with this movie is how unremarkable the soundtrack is. And it's not that I can't relate to it, because I was 18 years old. That's when I was the most plugged into the music I was listening to. And not even just that I was listening to, but like what was on the radio, it just doesn't feel, other than like...
Am I going to come back to my take that it feels surface?
Yeah, because like I can't think of any example. They're like Pessa Dutch is like used effectively, but there's no song in this movie that feels like, oh, this is Supermodel, this is Kids in America.
Right.
Like, it just doesn't feel connected to the movie in a way that matters, the way that so many of the other movies we've watched has.
The only time the soundtrack actually really hit me was the credits. It was the Donnas.
Right.
Doing Dancing with Myself. And I was like, okay.
That's fun.
And again, I don't know that I connected necessarily to the movie, but I was happy to hear it because I like that song by the Donnas.
Right.
But I think the only time
lazy.
I feel like the only time there's a song that is super connected to the action in the movie that gave me a little bit of a chuckle was Milkshake, when her little sister is dancing. That like little sister bit is also like a little bit unpleasant, but also kind of funny. Like, again, it feels like a throwback. It does not feel like 2004.
Yeah, that's
Girls
right.
Gone Wild was a thing when I was like in high school.
Exactly.
In the early 90s. Mm-hmm. And so all of these references to like girls flashing on TV and like, it feels like it's a different time period.
Yeah, I think so. It's odd.
Yeah, it definitely, of all the movies we've talked about recently, it feels like the soundtrack is the least connected to the movie itself and to what, it feels less necessary.
Yeah.
Like, you could swap out a bunch of these songs for other similar songs and it would not make a difference.
And I know not every movie has to have a killer soundtrack, but I think every teen movie should.
Yeah. And most of them that we've talked about
do. Yeah.
Like, so much of my early CD collection came from soundtracks, which then would introduce you to other artists you didn't know.
Totally.
And also, that was a huge part of music discovery.
Yeah, and we were talking about Cruel Intentions earlier, and I said how much I love that movie. Mm-hmm. But really what I love, I do love that movie, but one of the reasons that it's so important to me is because of the use of Bittersweet Symphony in that revenge scene, and because of the use of Colorblind when, spoiler alert, Sebastian dies. Like, those two songs became and are still two of my favorite songs because of their use in that movie.
Yeah.
And so I just think, like, why not use all the tools available to you to make something good? And I think it really does point to just like Tina's concern. And again, I guess it's fine. You can do whatever you want. It's your movie. But with like it actually sounds kind of like anti-comedy fan of me, and I'm such a comedy fan. Obviously, you know that. But like, to say like her biggest concern in telling the story is that the jokes are funny.
Yeah. No, I know. But two things can exist simultaneously.
Well,
like, we can both be lifelong comedy fans and also want a story with some heart to it.
Right, exactly. Especially when we have so many examples of movies that do both well. Do you want to talk a little bit about that Mean Girls musical? And the movie, which is also a musical. I'm using them kind of interchangeably. But,
I know very little about them.
I knew very little about them until I started doing research for this. So I don't have a ton to say. I want to just talk about a couple of changes.
It was shot in Jersey.
It was shot in Jersey, like pretty much entirely, I think. Because Mean Girls, like I said, interiors of the high school in Jersey, but most of it set in Illinois, shot in Canada. But the new one, I think, is almost exclusively shot in Jersey. It felt to me like somebody trying to make up for their mistakes in the first one. Because like I said, the cast is more diverse, which is great.
Yeah.
But maybe the problem is that I read Tina talking about it before I watched it. Because there's stuff, like I said, Janice is out. That's great. There's just a lot more of what maybe I would have hoped for the original movie, but because it's in this musical later that Tina helped write and blah, blah, blah. But in an article in the New York Times, they asked her about the like jokes and storylines. So I'm paraphrasing, but about race, sexuality, pedophilia, for example, statutory rape that haven't aged well.
Yeah.
And she said, I was writing in the early 2000s, very much based on my experience as a teen in the... Oh, we were right. And I didn't connect to this part because this is just the setup for what I want to talk about. So one thing is that we're kind of right about our speculation about how this happened. She says, I was writing in the early 2000s, very much based on my experience as a teen in the late 80s. It comes to no one's surprise that jokes have changed. And then she said, so fine, whatever. Like,
yeah.
But then she said, you don't poke in the way that you used to poke, even if your intention was always the same. It's just not how you do it anymore, which is fine. I very much believe you can find new ways to do jokes with less accidental shrapnel sideways. So she's kind of saying, like, I still want to, like, it's not really. And then she says, people were really rough. People are still horrible. They're just more likely to anonymously type it. This is true.
Yeah.
Tina said, emphasizing that people were still divisive and horrible, but were more likely to couch it in virtue. Now, here's the part where I'm like, Tina. Subsequent changes included Dawn Schweitzer being called a horny shrimp instead of a fat virgin in the burn book. She says, I know that even Regina would know that wouldn't fly. She's going to find a way to inflict pain on people, but she's not going to get herself in trouble. And one of the examples she includes is in the original when, I'm laughing, when Regina says, oh my God, it's her dream come true, diving into a huge pile of girls. Tina said, it was mine and Sam Jean, that's the director's, feeling that Regina wouldn't try that now because she knows the kids around her would be like, that's homophobic. She would know not to be homophobic and hopefully truly would not be homophobic. And it's like, Tina, you just said that the reason she wouldn't make that gay joke is because other people
would be mad at her. Not because you are telling on yourself. Yeah. It feels very, no one can make jokes anymore.
Yeah. Where she's like,
yeah.
And so I read that before I started watching the movie. And so it feels to me, it's a little hard to watch that as the movie having good intentions and not just Tina trying to stay out of trouble. Right. Just saying, like, she knows that, like, other people would be too sensitive if she made a funny gay joke.
Right.
It's like, girl, come on.
I know. It's like, that's not the point. You're completely, the point is gone way so far over your head that you don't know it exists.
So maybe I should have started with that article because I really feel like that explains why I've been so unfriendly toward Tina through this whole thing.
I think part of the reason that, even though, like, I also read part of that article and felt similarly, but I think part of the other thing about the reboot that surprised me, honestly, is that when you read, so I did not watch it, fair, caveat, whatever. When you read the description of the plot of the new 2024 version, it's the same thing. Every beat.
Jodie, it is like very almost, other than the things where it feels like Tina trying to fix things again.
But that's what I mean. Yeah. It's like, it's the same movie. They just swapped out the stuff that got them, that looking back would get them in trouble.
Right.
That's the only difference that I could see. And I'm like, well,
it is weird.
But then why?
Why? Yeah. And it's like, it's the swapping out and it's the things that would get them in trouble. And then just anything where like the epilogue at the end which is a get them in trouble thing, but it's also just like a two-pat thing of the young girls getting hit by the bus, what's her face, Regina joining the lacrosse team, and like that whole thing, I think is cut from it.
Well, that's kind of dumb because I love the idea of like, because I know that Renee Rapp, when interviewed about this movie, has said that I think she said something along the lines of God told her that Regina George was gay. And like, I support Renee Rapp in all of her endeavors and in all of her beliefs, until otherwise told I shouldn't, for whatever reason. But like, I like the ending of Regina joining the lacrosse team and the jocks not being afraid of her. It's like I think it's a nice way to kind of wrap up that story that is a little bit more interesting than she just gets a little better.
Well, it does allow for female aggression and anger in a way that like we don't often see.
I would watch, honestly, like I kind of wish that the movie had started about halfway through and the second half of the movie was like Regina's adventures on the lacrosse team.
I also think this movie is way too long. There's too much going on. Like with as little as going on, there's too much going on. Like the mathlete debate is like, I always forget that even, or debate, the mathlete competition.
Yeah.
Is like, I always forget. Once I get to that part of the movie, I'm like, all right, moving along. The sequel is longer by like 20 minutes.
Oh, good Lord.
It's like almost 2 hours long.
No, thank you.
I guess because of all the musical numbers, but.
Right. Yeah. I mean, like, I'm all for adding musical numbers to something. Sure. If the 2024 version of this movie was a new thing out of whole cloth, not directly pulled from this movie, I might actually be interested in it.
Great point. Really good point.
Because it's like a diverse cast, like funny satirical take on high school, Renee Rapp, like a bunch of like young, interesting actors, very quippy. I don't know. It might be more up my alley if it didn't refer to this original.
Or even if we didn't know Tina's feeling on it and the sort of like cultural commentary around it.
She should just not talk as much.
Well, because if I really felt like, oh, Tina has learned and this is the movie that like she was trying to make and just didn't quite have the like cultural awareness to do it.
Right.
And or if, you know, the studio was pushing for some things, whatever, blah, blah, blah. And that's where this movie came from. I could be more excited about it.
Exactly. Well, I watched Mean Girls for the first time.
So funny.
Did we do it?
Let's each say one positive
nice
thing about Mean Girls. Genuine and sincere.
Okay. Genuine and sincere. The mall in it felt like a real mall. I liked the fact that one of the characters worked in a store in the mall and ran into her classmates and her teacher there. That felt specific and real.
And Damien just kind of like getting in the way while she's trying to work and just clearly there to visit. And
like how when you worked a shit job, your friends would come and visit you at work and like bother you, and you'd, you know, often be left alone by your boss because they didn't care, and so you'd hang out with your friends while you were, you know, putting books back on shelves or videotapes.
It was so delightful to be on either side of that because there's something so funny about showing up to your friend's job to me. Just being like, you're here at work and I'm just here fucking around. Yeah. But then also just the sweet just moment of being reconnected to the world by seeing your friends while you're at work. What a joy.
To like momentarily lift you up out of the drudgery of being like a cog in a, you know, money-making retail machine.
Nothing like that anymore.
No.
I'm sure for plenty of other people, but here in my dungeon. Okay, and mine is, I think Neil Flynn is really lovely in this movie. And the scene when Katie says, like, my friends hate me and now my mom does too. And he says she doesn't hate you, she's just afraid of you. And they have a really tender moment. The parent-child relationship in that movie, again, is thin because everything in this movie is. But I do think it's generally better than a lot of other teen-parent relationships in movies.
I would agree with you with her dad. I think Anna Gasteyer, no. I love Anna Gasteyer. I just, her character here is a piece of paper.
Yeah, actually, I do want to take that back. You're right. It is between her and Neil Flynn, which is nice. Which is actually even less typical that the father gets to be, you know, a little
without
thoughtful.
It being a thing. Without it being like a specific call out of like, he's the thoughtful dad.
Exactly.
It's just like, he's her dad and he's kind of good.
Yeah. So I like that.
Yeah. I agree.
And like just like a little thing too that is maybe worth tracing in these movies is like it's another one with first person voiceover.
Right. Yeah.
Katie sort of narrating her experience in a similar way to Cher. But the other thing we get in this movie that we don't get with Cher is we get a lot of Katie's. This is an interesting thing about the movie that is maybe worth like giving it a little credit for, is the way her like internal sort of like fantasy version of things integrate with the real world.
Yeah, we actually hadn't mentioned that at all. And I think that that's I'm glad that you caught that at the end, because I do think that like that slippage between reality and fantasy is something that is so inherent in Yellow Jackets and in a lot of the other stuff we've talked about. And I'm amazed that we were so busy talking about Tina Fey that we forgot to talk about that very important structural technique in the movie of like suddenly having reality flip up into, humans running around on their hands and knees attacking each other like wild animals in all of Africa.
Right. We got to flip it right back to talking shit, but because they make it so hard not to.
Drove me nuts.
Yeah, but I will say, poor Mark is maybe getting the short end of the stick here because of Tina. Because there's some really cool stuff he does. Like whenever I was noticing, whenever Katie is in voiceover and it is on her. Like the camera is on her as opposed to looking through her eyes. She's in slow motion. And then when she gets caught up to talking with whoever she's talking with again, it's at the regular pace. And there's no it's not like, it just seems to be a cool way to indicate that we're kind of like in her mind with her at that point. And it's just like a stylistic choice that is interesting and that I can't think of having seen. Yeah,
it's a subtle little like signpost.
Yeah. And I wonder what shooting those scenes were like. I think it's cool.
Yeah.
So props to Mark.
Yeah, I think I was taken out. I can't not do it. I was taken out of the coolness of those like slippages in reality by what was actually happening, which was like a stereotype of all of Africa as a place that is a savanna with a watering hole. So
I think there's a way to look at this movie in terms of its form, which in some ways is interesting and cool, and then its content, which is maybe often less so.
Yeah, agreed.
So anyway.
All right. Okay.
We did it.
We said some positive stuff. I think in conversation with all the other films we've just watched, it's really interesting to think about it.
Yeah. Yeah, I wouldn't want to pretend otherwise.
So what are we doing next week?
Ooh.
We're still in high school. We're going to be in high school forever.
Yeah, for some reason I thought this movie was a little later than it is, but it's not.
Yeah.
1999. Matthew Broderick. Yeah, truly. Reese Witherspoon. Satirical black comedy. Based on Tom Perrotta's 1998 novel. That's quick. That
is a year.
Yeah.
That's fast. Yeah.
They must have, I'll bet before it was even published, they were in the works making it.
Yeah.
Election.
I have a positive association with this movie.
Me too.
I know I've seen it. I promise. I know. Who knows? You know what? Don't believe anything I say anymore. Don't trust my memory. I don't. But I remember liking this movie in my imagination. We'll find out. But yeah, I mean, Reese Witherspoon, we were just talking about Cruel Intentions. Like, this is this kind of world that we're swimming around in that Yellow Jackets also like pulls from constantly. This is obviously from the list that we referenced weeks ago, the Letterboxd list of all the movies referenced in Yellow Jackets, just to remind everyone where this weird pattern of films is coming from.
Yeah. And my feeling on Election is that it is like dark and weird in a positive way, in a way that maybe a movie like Mean Girls could have benefited from. So yeah, Chris Klein. Yeah. I'm excited to watch and talk about this one.
Yeah, me too. So in the meantime, I don't know if I should even ask this. So
we don't want to hear from you this week.
I was just going to say maybe we shouldn't ask them to email us with their opinions.
No, I do want to hear. It's important to engage in dialogue and discourse and etc.
Yeah. Let us know if. Oh, you know what? Why don't people should email us and let us know if there are other like super famous quotable movies that they've revisited that they've had a similar reaction to, where they're like, I feel weird about this.
That's a I feel like there was one that we had not recently, in the beginning, that I was so excited for us to watch that I hadn't watched in a while and then had to spend a lot of time apologizing
Radio Flyer?
for. No, I stand by Radio Flyer.
Yeah. There's a lot of those, I think.
Yeah, but you can do that by leaving us a review on Apple Podcasts or by reaching out to us on Instagram at WatchersPodNJ. You can email us, watcherspodnj@gmail.com.
Yep, you can find me on Instagram at Jodie_Mim, JODIE_MIM.
And I'm at AQ Andrea Q.
And we will see you next week in Papillion, Nebraska, which is where my dear friend Heather Flock's family is from, outside of Omaha. Because that's where Election was filmed.
Oh, is that how you say it?
In Nebraska, yes.
They say Papillion? That's
They sure
great.
do. They sure do. I checked with Heather.
That's so funny.
Yep.
Papillion. Listen,
Nebraska.
I can't talk shit here in South Jersey. If you've ever been to Buna, New Jersey.
Gosh. Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we'll see you in Nebraska.
See you in Nebraska.